Okay, so today I'm talking to Rich Clark. He's got a great YouTube channel. It's all about the future, like me. Only, Rich, your stuff's about movies and AI in movies. So, what made you set up the channel?
Well, originally, it was by accident that it got into this idea of future work.
Mm,
Um, I was just talking about because my background is art, so I was a musician, producer. I always liked films and so forth. And then it kind of evolved that the posts what did better were about the future or things which were futuristic. So that's kind of where it went from there. And now I've just found more and more films which I remember a lot of them from the 80s actually were films which I remember, and then I think, oh, actually that kind of shapes what my thoughts are now and how I'm looking at how they were made then and how they're now quite prominent, and some of the ideas are some of the negative and the positive. So it's an interesting kind of dynamic.
what I noticed was, I mean, if you go back further, there were very few films about time, AI. Uh, though you had sci-fi films, they weren't time oriented, and it's almost as if we came into a time when we're ready to understand time, if that makes sense. I just found that it was around the 80s we started to get them films, but it's got stronger and stronger. And now quite a proportion of films that are made change the past, different parallel universes. There's a lot of it. And I sometimes think it's we're ready to understand time. We're ready to kind of be in control of time more. Whereas you think of our ancestors, they weren't. They just had to do backbreaking work in order to put food on the table. And they believed a lot mustn't upset the gods or whatever. Now we know we're in control of our reality. And AI is that next step, isn't it? Where do we go with AI? So I'm going to ask you a question. What's your favorite film to do with AI in the future?
At the moment, I've actually thought that for it's more robots actually I found, and the one
Hmm,
I've found, which I've actually rewatched all these films again, and the one that's been the most interesting was I Robot. I thought that was quite interesting.
that
The
was
concept
great.
of that, how they had the three laws of robotics, which
Mm,
was, but I think what was another interesting point is all these stories, which are now in the 80s, 90s, 2000s, were all originally written in the 50s and 60s.
yeah.
So that's an interesting kind of concept of how people who wrote them probably saw where these films would be, but they didn't
Mm,
have technology then to do them. So I found
wow.
that. So I Robot, actually, when you read the book, because I've read all, that's the thing, I've read all the books as well.
Wow.
So reading the book, seeing the film, that's about the closest one, I'd say. Um,
Wow, I love that. I love the idea of robots. I mean, I really, and people are quite scared of them because obviously you have that tension in movies. But for me, I think it could be tremendous. In every aspect, health, doing operations. Just, I was talking to an amazing young girl. Say young girl, she's probably in her late 20s. She's a surgeon in the Middle East, and she's training to use robotics so that she can be in a different country operating via a robot on somebody, and it will be more precision than if she was there with the scalpel in her hand. And I think the sci-fi movies have been portraying this long before we realized it was coming into being.
Yeah, and I think there's this two-sided prong of it as well. So some of the movies are all the negative side. I thought as much as I Robot had that part, it also showed the positive of what you could do. And I thought that's where I think it's a better film than some of the others. Because I think
Mm,
what we've got to start realizing, instead of being scared of other, is actually to
yeah,
sort of understand there's a thread of similarity.
yeah,
Um, but I thought why I like the iRobot one is that three laws is interesting because it's talking about the idea of the way you've got to, if you construct it correctly, AI and humans can work very well. What I think is the issue they're always worried about is this idea of self awareness. And that's where the fear comes in. But the
yeah,
only reason I think humans are scared of self awareness is because if a robot has self awareness, they're not motivated by money, by greed, by
sure.
the ethics are different as well. So they will go to what we call a moral directive. So it will be like like hermetic laws. So they will go, I will not do this because of this. I know the consequence. Whereas humans sometimes will go to their emotional capability, and that's where they make sometimes their wrong mistakes. Robots won't do that, and that's why humans are afraid of them, because they know that the robots will take away emotion. And if people took away their emotion in most decisions, the decisions would be very different. I think that's a key point, I think.
That's really, really interesting. So what recent films have come out that have really caught your interest?
I've watched, there was a series called Foundation, which is set in the future. That's quite complex. And that's, and again, Isaac Asimov again.
Right.
He's someone I've got really into a lot to read about, because he's also done a book about religion as well. It's quite interesting, how it works and
I
constructs.
think I started watching Foundation. I'm trying to remember what happened in it.
It's a bit of a slog.
Yeah. I'll
It's an
probably
hour
gave up
episode
then.
and it's full on, and you've got to really like watch every bit of it, because it's about control, and then the
Yeah.
idea of these people then put to another planet, and they've got to create a new civilization to beat this old civilization. It's very well detailed, and it's the technology ideas in it are very advanced.
Yeah.
It's the most. I think they spend about 2 million an episode on it. It is, and it's like,
Wow.
oh, it's on Apple TV, and it's amazing.
Wow.
But yeah, I think that's my favourite at the moment. And then new
Wow.
film, I would say Tenant was an interesting idea by Christopher Nolan, which is kind of like, again, it shows in that how you can go back in time and watch and change an event. And
Yeah.
I thought that's an interesting idea, um, because you're then going into the idea of time changes, quantum physics, things like that. Tenant, though, I think for the audience when it came out, because it came out kind of in between the COVID lockdowns, was a bit too advanced for the audience. I think 5 years time, people will go, "My God, that film's amazing." I think now it was just a little bit too advanced. Kind of like,
Elon Musk watched it and said, I must watch it a second time. And I think it is a film to watch twice.
I've watched it 5, and there's still things I'm finding in it. It's
Wow.
a very, very good film. But in fact, what's interesting is Christopher Nolan now, his new project is the Prisoner series from the 60s, he's going to do into a film. And so
Wow.
he's going to kind of mix the ideas of Tennant, some of the ideas of Inception into the Prisoner. So I think that will be an interesting idea, because I don't know if you'll do it. I don't think you'll do it in Port Merion like the original, but
Mm.
I think the idea of it is this idea of being imprisoned and how you'll be controlled, censored. And I think personally, a lot of people have sort of had a bit of doubt on it. I think he'll make that project, like, I think it'll probably be a major, massive film, and on the conscious level as well. And I think he'll probably palette it down a bit, where Tennant was probably a little bit too advanced for people, I think.
That would be really interesting because I used to love The Prisoner. So
Yeah,
I
it's
could
one of my
watch it.
favorite TV series. I mention it on my YouTube channel, about the idea of suppression and control, and why in the 60s that was very important, because people were then also afraid of the control they were losing, their
Yeah.
personal autonomy, to then
Yeah.
becoming dictated by governments and corporations. And that's actually, as much as that series is dated, there's a lot of ideas in it are very much, again, 30, 40, 50 years on.
Yeah.
So
I read somewhere that the first ever film talking about AI was back in about 1905. It's a
yes,
really, really old film. I can't remember what it's called now.
Metropolis is kind of a little bit about it by I can't think of it, Fritz Lang.
Yeah.
That's like the odd, but the trouble is, I mean, obviously, watching a 30s film, everybody looks like they're in cardboard kind of thing. It is,
Mm.
but the concept again is there, because a lot of the idea of the futuristic did come from sort of German psychoanalysis, and then
Yeah.
the American writers took it on, like Philip K. Dick and Isaac Asimov, who's actually Israeli. So there's a lot of these people, just these occasional people, take it off, and then it kind of develops from there. So I don't
It's
know.
amazing how accurate they were, considering how far back Philip K. Dick, Asimov, and a few others were writing. And when you see the things they were predicting about the future, it is quite mind-blowing how accurate they were.
But they were also considered crazy, and Philip K. Dick
Yes.
sectioned
yeah,
a lot because they didn't like what he was saying. So it's still, even in that time, as much as he was trying to,
mm,
because K. Dick died about before Blade Runner, which is my next film I'm talking about soon.
mm.
He died just about 6 months before it was finished, and Philip K. Dick watched most of it being finished, and he came on set and he said, "This is the most accurate someone has done for my books," and he was so happy that he got to see it
Wow,
before he died. Um,
wow,
so I think that was a really interesting thing, because I spoke about Total Recall, which is another Philip K. Dick book,
yeah, yeah,
um, but Blade Runner was actually Philip K. Dick approved it, because a lot of the time people wanted to adapt his books, and every time he read the script, he's like, "This is crap. I don't want
mm.
this. This You have not got my book at all." But whoever the writers of Blade Runner um, got it. They
They
somehow
got
Philip
it.
K. Dick.
I love that. That is
I think you couldn't get a better endorsement, really, for that film.
you couldn't. I love that film so much. It was cast so well, the visuals, the music, everything. It was such a disappointment, the later one, part two. But that film, I look at it and just see a perfect film. I just see it as
And
everything.
it's strange, at the time it flopped. It didn't do very well, and it's only that people revisited it like 10 years later, and they went,
Mm.
"Oh, this film's amazing!" And it's just like, so sometimes you can do a film which just is not ready for the audience. And I
Yes.
think 1982, when it came out, I mean, I think people just could justify the idea of ET. Sorry, the audience was like, if it's an imaginary thing, then they can take it. But when it's too close to what they could see,
Yeah.
that
It didn't
frightens
seem that
people.
far in the future, did it? I think that was part of it. You could imagine that not being 30 years from where you were or whatever.
It
It
didn't
didn't.
look dated. Whereas if you like, I've done a film. I talked about RoboCop recently, because that's
Yeah,
about.
yeah.
But if you look at it, you can tell it's made in the 80s.
Mm, mm.
The budget. But Blade Runner, considering it had such a small budget, it really looks like dystopian Japan. And if you look
Yeah,
at it,
yeah.
it's like, watch it, you're going, "I can't believe they made. There's no computer graphics. It's all
Mm.
done with
Yeah,
set."
yeah.
And even when they made it, there were so many issues. I mean, Ridley Scott, who I think really does, because his direction is excellent.
Mm,
I don't think Ridley Scott's ever done a better film than Blade Runner, and that's quite a controversial thing to say, because he's made some very good films. But
mm.
I feel with that, I think he just got the right writers. The writer actually from Blade Runner wrote RoboCop. Actually, I found out as well,
Right, 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 right.
which I thought was interesting. And then I just feel that, so that's why, again, when I'm exploring these things, it's about trying to get people to understand that these films are an alternative to the future, but it
Mm.
doesn't mean that you can, if you have a better mindset, you don't see the bad things what they show in these films. So I think they're
Yeah,
warning
yeah.
films, pre-warnings. I think they're quite interesting how they do that.
It's great. It's great you mentioned 80s films. So I do love 80s films. I mean, they're just easy to watch and they're dynamic and the characters are brilliant. I mean, I do really like. I've actually watched a few films in recent times. I've been so bored. They're way too long. They've stretched out. They've been boring and they're woke. And I'm just bored with woke shit. I'm just sick.
And that's why I did this, because what I wanted to do is get people to look at these films and go, right,
Mm.
let me rewatch these films if they haven't seen them. Like if you're in like 30s, 40s, 50s, and
Yeah,
older,
yeah,
rewatch the films. And I want new people to watch them, because I want them to go, "Oh wow, these are really
yeah,
good films. There's a message, but it's not rammed down your throat." And I think
yeah.
that's what I kind of wanted. I wanted, and because I tried to watch some new stuff, and I was like, God, it's like it's
It's very samey, I'm finding a lot of the new stuff. And what we're talking about, Blade Runner, Total Recall, they were groundbreaking in their day. If you sat, and Star Wars was another one that was just, when I mean, my kids were really little and I got a babysitter and I went to watch it, and it was just like, you'd not seen anything like it before. And
I
Total
found out the other
Recall,
day that Total Recall was the most expensive made film at the time,
wow,
which you think, the budget and the risk of doing that at that time.
yeah.
And do you know how much they spent on it? You're gonna laugh. It was like 50 million. Now films they make for like 100, 200 million, and most of them flop.
That was a
So
fortune then, though.
yeah, yeah.
I
And
always thought it was low budget. To me, it looks like
I
low
did as
budget.
well. And it was only when I found out and researched it, it was all filmed in a place in Mexico. And
Yeah,
accordingly, most of the cast got food poisoning. There were so many issues on the film, and that's why I don't. One thing I don't talk. I'm going to probably start doing is I'm trying to find makings of to attach them to my videos, because because with a lot of these, when I'm talking about these, I actually watch the makings of as well. So I put
Yeah.
that in. But the people who do the makings of are really good YouTubers, and
Yeah.
I mean, the one I watched, I mean, I know it's a randomly off topic, but there was even, I watched like the making of Roger Rabbit. I like to know how that was made, and there was all these different.
How it was put together, because that was different in its time. That hadn't been done before. So what films are kind of current or coming up? Is there any that you're looking forward to coming out, or any recent releases?
I tell you what I would like, and this is because I like the comic books, and then they talk about time travel and so forth, is the X-Men series. Now, I love the comics.
Oh, I watch a lot of stuff that's based on graphic novels.
Yeah, I think that
Yeah.
to me is where I just fear with Disney, because I don't think they do Marvel very well.
Hmm.
I think if they did the X-Men films better than they've done now, and they did them more like the comic books and graphic novels,
Yeah.
that to me could do a really good film. It just depends on who does it. Now they've just redone the X-Men cartoon, and it's excellent. It's
Wow.
but it's a cartoon. So the trouble is, most people think, oh, it's for kids. It's not for kids. It's a lot more adult, and that which was the X-Men comic were based on. Because the idea of
Yeah.
X-Men comics were based on the divide of Martin Luther King's vision and Malcolm X's vision. So that was
Yeah.
the kind of, and they put it into comic books. That was the idea. So I would like that as a film, but really well done. And I think they haven't done it well yet. I think that to me is where the best films will come from. I think they're going to come from graphic novels. I just think the average people, filmmakers, just don't take the risks, and I think that's because of
Yeah.
corporations who they
Yeah,
make.
they got to have that's why all the films are the same. I got rid of I stopped watching Netflix on Sky. The movies are either rom-coms, or it is there's a bunch of kids in a cabin and strange things start, and you just go, oh, again, it's the same film made with different characters, and it just gets boring, because they know it's a formula that young people will watch it or whatever, or a certain amount of people are going to watch it. But when you get something innovative and exciting, there's not that many at the moment, but you do get the odd one that you just say, wow. I mean, I was just
I think there's also something I think people are going to have to realise is that Hollywood do not dictate the market anymore. I think the market, and if they get the budgets, is if you watch Korean films, they're very
I do.
interesting, very
Yeah,
beautifully done. A lot of them, they are
yeah,
very violent as well, but they are excellent.
yeah.
China, I still think people disregard, and they think, oh, Chinese films are going to be rubbish. But there are some Chinese films about the future. They're talking about future ideas and metaverses and stuff like that. And I think I think this is going to be a big one. If Disney get bought out by a Chinese company,
Oh, yeah.
I think because Disney own Marvel and the rest of it, I think then China will then produce a lot of films which they
Mm.
know they're going to have to appeal to the Western market. And I
Yeah.
think they will take a lot more risks, and more risks, not in a way of, oh, we're getting a diverse director. It's actually taking stories which they know have a big market and they'll sell. Because China or Saudi or Middle East, they don't buy into something which doesn't sell. Whereas in America at the moment, they have an issue because of comic books. Comic books in the 90s, mid 90s, went very woke, as they call the termination word. And I think because of that, that's where Disney have gone. They've actually kind of gone the same road comic books went, that ended up Marvel going bankrupt.
Yeah.
So they've not learned from the lessons. Whereas I think when you've got China and Middle East money and other money like that, that will be
I
more.
watch a lot of the Japanese and anime. I watch anime, and I'm halfway through Godzilla at the moment. And you think a silly kids film, but it's actually really, really well done. So I would love. I love the Koreans are very good at
Yeah.
slipping around in time. They're very good at time orientated, AI orientated. They're very, very good. The Koreans. Japanese I watch. I'm used to, you're going back a lot of years, a lot of decades. I used to watch Chinese, really old Chinese ghost movies.
Yeah.
And there are really, so I'd love them to do more, because the whole Disney verification of movies is very, very formula.
Yeah.
That's why, like the Squeeze song, wife always looks the bleeding same. This have the same family, the estranged dad, the daughter that don't talk to them, the wife's dead. It's the same stuff every film, every TV show. When you go whiz over to the Chinese, the other thing that I find Chinese Japanese aren't scared to do, they don't meet the girl at the end. She is she is dead or whatever. They aren't
They don't
scared to
believe
have
in happy endings.
tragedies.
They don't always believe in happy endings. What they see is that the
Mm,
ending has to go right for the story. It sometimes comes full circle. But I will be honest, like most of the best films I have seen outside of the technology stuff
mm,
has been from Korea,
mm.
from Japan. I mean,
Yeah.
anime, to me, one of the animes which, if they ever made into film, would be very difficult, is a series called Neon Genesis,
All
and that
right. Yeah.
is it's very much about philosophy. It's Western philosophy put
Yeah.
into a
Yeah.
Japanese anime film series,
Mm,
and it's very good. To put it into a film would be very difficult, but if they did like a series of films, that would
yeah.
be a series.
That'd be amazing. So where do you see the trends heading? Do you see that we're going into it? I mean, we've had Matrix, the last Matrix, Matrix 4, I suppose that was. Uh, what direction are we going in with movies and AI? And are they taking more risks? Are they starting to be?
There is actually a new risk coming. There's another film is
Mm,
being done at the moment. There's a technology film coming out now, and it's by I can't remember. I read it the other day. It's they've actually independently funded it, and it's the director, someone who I was quite surprised did it, that they've done. That's going to be a film based in the future, and that's coming out in this summer.
wow.
They also did another film which last year was with robots as well, and I've just tried to forget it. It's with Denzel Washington's son, and I watched that as well. That was really good. It
He's
wasn't,
a good little actor, isn't he? I
yeah,
like him.
I
Yeah.
can't remember his
Yeah.
name because he was in Tenet, and he's someone I think he seems to pick his projects well, and I
Mm,
think that to me is where Hollywood are going to go. They're going to go into what I call independent funded technology based ideas. And I think it's what they're going to try and do is instead of being always negative, they're going to show it of how societies can work together. And I think that is
that's going to be interesting. That's going to be, yeah. I think you're right with China. They've got straight away. They're. I mean, I love Stephen Chow. I don't know if you watched
yes,
these.
yeah, 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 yeah.
Stephen Chow. Love Stephen Chow. He made a movie which I didn't get at all. A couple of years ago, and it was batshit. It was mad, but it was the biggest grossing movie in China. And I love his work, but it was too mad for me. And what was that other Chinese film that won an Oscar? Everything,
Chinese
everywhere.
film. It was actually Korean. Was Parasite. Now
I
Parasite.
watched Parasite. Yeah.
Yeah. Now that's kind of a social. That's a
Mm,
social
mm,
type
mm,
film.
mm.
The guy who creates that, he's actually one of the most. He did Orca, I think, or something, which is about the pig. So he's actually a very big Korean director. Um, I mean, the one I would like is my favorite Korean director because I love his style is Wong Kar Wai, and I'd
All
love
right.
him to do a technology film but with a romance idea because his romance films are Chung Kung Express, In the Mood of Love, Blueberry Nights he did as well. They're great.
Yes.
Oh, these are sorry because my film knowledge. They're,
Ah,
these are great romantic films, but I think if he did one mixing with technology, I
mm,
mean, people have done it with her. They've done it with Ex Machina, but they haven't done it in a way that it's more interesting. Like she kind of does it, but it doesn't. I think the Koreans, because of their storytelling, is so strong.
mm,
I think with they mix it with the technology. I think you'd have to use like Japanese direct, like cinematography, animation,
mm,
mix the
mm,
two
mm.
together. Because I've even got an idea of a plot film or a TV series I've written, which is actually mixing anime with live action, and I thought of that as an idea
Yeah, 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 yeah.
because I think there's
Absolutely.
so
Um,
much there that can take people further, and I think we've got the technology to do it. So I think why don't
have you seen Attack on Titan? Not the actual movie. There's a movie. I don't know if you've watched any Attack on Titan, but um, it's hugely successful. But there's a movie of Attack on Titan, and they do mix the two,
yeah.
and it does it. I just thought, oh, this is going to be so bad, but it actually really
I think why people thought it was going to be bad because originally they tried to do the Incredible Hulk movie with comic book style and film,
yeah,
and unfortunately Ang Lee messed that up. And I think
yeah,
Ang Lee at the time had done really good films, was really innovative, and then he kind of did this Incredible Hulk, which just he didn't get the story right, and it was his fault. It wasn't his fault. I think what he had trouble is he had pressure from the studio to rush it, and
yeah,
then you kind of see where he's slipped bits. And
yeah,
it,
yeah,
but I still think Ang Lee, I still think is someone who I'd never discount out because he's always someone to come up with Hero, House
yeah,
of Flying Daggers.
yeah,
He's
yeah,
got that still there, and I think some of the older directors, because they've got the experience, if they take them risks, they not actually care because they'd be like, well, if I spent 100 million on a good film, and if it flops, it doesn't matter. I still can retire. I've got enough money.
yeah, yeah,
I
yeah,
think
yeah.
that's what we've got to do. I think, and you have to have enough of them to then get the new directors and the new filmmakers from universities or
Mm, mm.
training as DOPs or whatever. Because that's what I feel is the biggest issue. Is when we had like in the 80s, we had George Lucas and Steven Spielberg, they all trained at university and then they all trained to get to that point.
Mm.
What they're doing now is they get like a very indie director who's done like a very basic film, and then you're going, we're going to give you £200 million budget, and I'm like, they haven't got the experience to even.
No, this is happening in a lot of industries, and it is, yeah, go earn your stripes, go and build
You
up
have
gradually.
to. You have
So,
to.
so if there was one film, say that people haven't watched a lot of things like this, and you kind of, which film would you tell people to watch that kind of shows how films, maybe in the past, have really highlighted AI or futuristic, how it act the most realistic?
It's going to go back to a TV series,
Right.
actually, for me. And I think I've mentioned too, but to me, Humans, I thought was the most
Yeah, yeah.
realistic.
I found that creepy.
It, it is creepy, but I think it is the way I think humans and AI and
Mm.
robots will have that kind of conflict. And
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
that's what I would say is in the near future, the next 5 years. So I think that show, as though it was creepy, and there were some real bits in it which makes people, and I think it's designed like that. It's designed to make you
Oh,
feel
yeah, yeah,
uncomfortable.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
But at the end of it, of the third series, there is that kind of thing of thinking, we have got to accept this. It is going to happen. And
It
I
is going
think
to
that's
happen.
why they were going to do a fourth series, and they said there wasn't enough there wasn't enough support for it. I think because it had been a bit overdrawn out. That was its problem. But
Yeah, yeah.
because I think you've got to think of the audience now. The audience attention span is not
A
an
lot
hour.
of things are made now to go 10 series, and so they do stretch out the first bit. And
And you
I
can't do
give,
that. It doesn't work.
yeah, I watch 2, 3 episodes of something, and I often give up. I watched the whole series of that, and I think half the second series, but I did get bored of it. But I do get bored with things. They have to, for something to grip me.
Well, look, I think that makes sense though with the audience because you've got to think if the average audience is so used to watching very quick. That's why I think with movies when they do them 2, 3 hours, like
Yeah.
Dune 2, like that's a perfect example. Why are you doing a film 2 to 3 hours? The average audience span of attention isn't that. It's
And
like
and the thing
an
is,
hour and a
it's
half,
you have an hour where you're just quite bored, and they say, "No, we're
and it doesn't
building it
go
up." I
anywhere.
was just bored. Dune 2, I was just bored. I was just bored
There's no
watching it.
character development. And the thing is,
That's exactly it.
if you read like Frank, I can't think of his surname, the guy who wrote the books. When you read the books, he wrote 7 books altogether, right?
Right,
So
right.
I hope they don't get to Dune 7 because I don't think anyone would have that attention.
I won't watch
But
it.
but the idea is that to me you've got to have it in a book. It's very singular. So the average person who reads a book can read a book 2, 3, 4, 5 hours, and you think about it, most people don't read a book 4 hours in a row.
Mm.
They take it in chunks. So a film to me has to have something where if you're going to do a series like a trilogy or something, you've got to
Yeah,
do it. Like every one of them films is an hour and a half, and I
yeah, yeah,
think
yeah,
that's why the first
yeah,
Matrix worked, because it was an hour and a half. The other
yeah.
two Matrices were 2.5 hours each. That's why people didn't like them, because they're too
Them too
long.
much. You're absolutely right. And the thing is, if you keep it to an hour and a half, you've got all your best bits in there. That is all your best bits. It's
But it's
going to be
also
so
what
much
Matrix,
better.
where they made a really, why Matrix, the first one, did so well, was because they also did a series called Animatrix, which was anime. So if you
I saw
wanted to
that.
know
Yeah,
the background more of the characters, that was what led the people to go, oh, I want to know a bit more about that
yeah,
character. Do
yeah.
that. To me, a film has to be a film. If you want to do a little animation TV series or something like that, do that to back up the characterizations. And that to me is where Marvel have made a massive mistake with Disney, because if people know the comics, they want them to be quite faithful to the comics. You know what comic nerds are? They're quite,
Yeah, yeah,
quite, ADHD intrinsic. They want things to be like precise, and you can't sometimes. It doesn't. You can't always translate comic to film. But to
mm,
me, if you do a good film, hour and a half, gets to the point, and then if you wanted to do that, develop little stories of them characters, and they've done
yeah.
it well with Wolverine, so that it can be done. So
Yeah, of
to me,
course it can. Yeah,
and
spin-offs.
I don't know why they don't plan it like that, because that's how comic books worked, and
Well, I
people.
think maybe your point about the Chinese starting to make Chinese, Japanese, Far East, Korean, making more of this, I think is really good idea, and I think that's gonna massively work. So, um, okay, this has been great. Tell us how people can find you, watch your show.
Okay, so um, Throwback Thursday every Thursday on YouTube under Rich Clark. You literally put at, I think it's underscore Rich Clark, and every Throwback Thursday I put on 3 films. Sometimes I do albums, TV series, but that is what I mainly work on. And if you watch them, please give me comments. Subscribe would be good, because I haven't got enough subscribers, so I do need to get the subscriptions up.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm doing the
Um,
same. Yeah,
but that would be really good. And then I think that's where you get the ideas. And also, what it is to me, it's also getting people to go and watch these films. And
mm,
actually, I want not just creatives, I want just normal people to watch them. And if they can, that also helps them old films make money, and then directors who may want to actually do new projects, which they haven't got the funding for. So if you
yeah.
get them that way, you get people, work. Even if it's like they haven't done work for 30 years, it still helps. So,
I
you know.
love that. So we'll start with the 80s films and work our way. So watch one a week, maybe start with the 80 films and work your way through to
Yeah,
the
and
current
I
time.
think I've done as already. I've done about 35 films I've reviewed. I've
Mm,
also done about TV series, not all AI, but they're all to good TV series. I've done about
futuristic and yeah,
yeah, I've done about 15 of them.
great.
So there's enough there, and like I said, I've the last couple of weeks I've done one every 2 weeks, but I'm going to be doing regularly, because I'm having to watch the films and then just double check my
Yeah,
knowledge, because I
yeah.
don't want to keep reading about what the films are, because there's some things where that doesn't feel so interesting. So I'm trying to kind of just come up with a term, and
Try and
then
find the one that's 1905. I can't remember. It's
I've,
renowned.
I've, I've, I've got data, and I'm a bit
It is
broken.
about a woman that was AI. It was about a woman,
Yeah.
a goddess that was AI or something. I can't remember.
I think you are talking about Metropolis. I'm sure that's what you're
I
talking
am
about.
talking about Metropolis. I am. I remember now. Yeah, I am.
Now, which version do you want? Because I've got 5 different versions of that.
Just the first.
Yeah, yeah, because they have re-edited it and re-put it
No,
in.
no, no. Go back to the origin, because to think of that back then and be the original show. No, do that and I'll watch it. But
Fritz Lang, yeah.
this,
And any of them things as well. Obviously,
thank you.
I can just
Thank you.
recommend
This
it.
has been great. I love talking about these things. They're super exciting, but I'm going to go on your channel and have a look. Thank you.
No problem.